Hello. So, how did I go from working every day, living in an apartment with a stoop on the sidewalk and asphalt for a backyard, to this? To this life. It's story time. This is Rain on the Road, and I'm going to tell the story of how I went from working, living in an apartment in the city, just regular, everyday life, to just making my way in paradise. Okay? I think I'm getting a little sunburn. Plus, I've been working really hard. It's the first long paddle I've had for a while. It's been a while since I've been out paddling, and I've come probably 3 miles upstream. So, I digress. How did I get here? Like many, many people, it started in 2020. I guess it sort of started before that. There is a prologue, but in 2020, so many things changed for so many people, and that's true for me too. Although it wasn't really about that, and it wasn't about COVID, but that obviously influenced me the way it influenced everybody. Work changed, interacting with people changed, but I had already kind of kicked off this journey. I just didn't really know it yet. So in 2020, I bought a short bus. I bought a school bus, which is a short bus. Now, I grew up in the 70s where there were endless jokes about the short bus, and you can't tell them anymore. However, so many people on the road are in my generation or right behind it. So there's always some little commentary, about the short bus for, don't mind me. Sorry, my hat brim is bent. I don't know why. Anyway, the short bus, and all I have to say about that is shorties rule. I say that all the time. Shorties rule, and it's kind of, oh, that's how that got bent. It's a little double entendre. My first year out traveling, the bus has its own name, but I started calling it Shorty with a Porch because it has a porch. You might already know that if you're on my YouTube. And so that was like a thing, right? It's the Shorty with the porch, because people would say, oh, where are you? Meaning, where are you parked when I was at a gathering, or what are you driving? And I would say, it's the Shorty with the porch. And everybody, of course, immediately would know that, or with the deck. But I think at the time I was saying porch a lot more. It has a deck feel. It has like a boat feel. There's a whole playlist of things about the bus. You can check that out. And please check it out. And subscribe. And you know what I'm never going to tell you to do? I'm not going to tell you to smash a subscribe button. You don't have to smash it. You just have to touch it. Just, that's all you have to do. Nobody has to smash their phone to subscribe to anybody, do they? Again, I digress. But that's why it's story time. And so you can learn about traveling on the road, and you also can get to know me, right? Because it's my channel. And if you're not interested in that, don't watch it, right? Nobody has to know me. I don't think the world's going to be interested, but then again, I think people are interested. People are interested in what's going on outside the box, and my life is like fully outside the box now. Plus, I used to do these videos, these like live videos on Facebook a lot when I was working, and then I would run into people and they'd be like, oh, I love your videos. And I'd just be like, okay, I don't really know why, but they just love watching them. I think people want to be connected, in some way. And we're not, we're on the phone, which isn't personal, so this can sort of be personal. Maybe it's vicarious. I don't know. I guess if you have comments, then it becomes more personal because I do want to interact with people. Anyway, back to the bus. So in 2020, I bought a shorty school bus, and that in itself is a story. Why don't I start with that one, right? It's kind of like a prologue that has to happen, but I'm just going to start from when I bought the bus. I had been bus shopping, and that'll come up in prologue as well. There'll be a prologue video at some point. I had been bus shopping online, and I had gone to see one or two in Massachusetts where I was living. I had driven like out west to somebody who had buses they bought at auction, or I don't know what it was. And I had just watched a ton of videos from schoolie life, people in schoolie life, and also van lifers. But I knew I wanted a bus, not a van. In the past, I had driven a couple of Volkswagen vans, probably 5 years previous, or a few years previous, because even then, I wasn't thinking van life, schoolie life, but I was thinking about traveling. And like any child of the 70s, I have that super romantic notion of the VW bus and traveling across the country. So I had driven a couple of those, and let's face it, they're small, and they're all 50 years old, and they're expensive, right? And they don't drive that great. You ever driven one of those things? You ever driven an old VW Standard? I took, one time I went to look at one, and I took my daughter with me. And if you've ever ridden in an old van, it's like this, right? Like it's very boxy and like up on top of the suspension, and you're bouncing around and you're right in the windshield with no, nothing in front of you the way that a car is. So you're just like in the glass and rocking back and forth, and it's a Standard. And I just remember that day. Kelsey, do you remember? You were like, she didn't say anything, but I could tell by her face she was horrified going around the corners in this thing. So that was kind of like off my list. And I had this list of criteria for buying a bus. It had to have low mileage, whatever people consider that to be. And for me, it was, under 200, certainly, because I was going to buy a diesel. I knew I wanted a diesel. That was another thing. I wanted a diesel engine, and, with reasonable mileage, whatever that is. In a gas truck, you definitely want 100 or under, or close to around there. But with the diesel, I know there's flexibility, and I had done so much. I call it reading. I did some reading. A lot of it is watching, people talk about engines and just whatever online research I could do about motors. And I wanted the 7.3 Power Stroke diesel. That's what I wanted. And, a smallish bus. And I had seen the buses that have the handicap door, either on the side, often on the back. I liked it on the back. So you get your regular emergency escape hatch door on the back, and then the handicap door, which was like, huge, like the whole height of the bus, and probably however wide it has to be for a wheelchair lift to go in there. So a good 3 feet across, right? So you get those two big open doors in the back, and I had seen buses that were done like that, and I thought, wow, that's really open. So that was on my list. So I looked at a few buses. There was one I really liked. It was like a 6-window, I'm not sure what engine it had. It was definitely a diesel. It was a bus, not a shorty bus, which I also consider, I call it like the kindergarten bus because I feel like preschoolers always get the short bus, right? They get the little buses, whatever reason, because it's only one class of kids, not a whole high school. So I wanted a smallish bus and with the handicap door. So the one I really liked, but it didn't have the door. And I'm like, no, you have to stick to your guns. You have these criteria. I'm not buying one that doesn't have the handicap door. So I continue searching. And one day on Facebook Marketplace, I see this bus. And again, just go to the playlist, see the About the Bus pages. So the bus has this deck on the back, this porch. And what happened was the guy who had this bus cut, I assume with like a blowtorch or something, cuts the back wall out. But not the roof, just the back wall. Pushes it in and re-welds it. So now the back wall of the bus is like halfway down the distance. And the back half of the bus has its whole roof, original windows, walls, like everything, just the back is missing. And there's a deck. And then it extends out even further, like 2 feet or something, and has this aluminum railing all around it. And it looks boatish, like people always say that, and it totally does. It has this boat feel, especially when it had just the railing all the way around the back. You know, like a party boat would look, or when you're on the back of a boat and you have that deck kind of jutting out. So it looks like that. And I saw that, and I was like, oh my God, that's the bus. That's my bus. That's the one. I was so excited. And it was in Kentucky. Mind you, I'm just outside of Boston. Not now, obviously, right? Yeah, not now. I am in Florida. I have no idea what town I might be near. This is the Silver River, by the way. A very popular kayaking spot. Silver Spring is about 2 miles that way. And the place where I popped in is about 3 miles that way, called Ray's Wayside, which is just a fishing boat launch site. So I saw this bus, and I was so enthralled. And I'm easily enthralled, as you can tell by my distraction in my conversation. Like right now, see the way the sunlight is reflecting up here? This is a little thing that I get to notice, like that blue heron. This is my life now, instead of working every day. And don't get me wrong, I loved my job while I was working. But being in this slow space and being able to just sit and be fascinated and in love with the way the light plays up off the water is great. Back to the bus story. I saw the bus in Kentucky. I messaged the guy, and he wanted $5,500 for it. And I'm like, I want this bus. I think it was Thursday at like midnight or something. And I stopped messaging the guy, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be down or whatever. And turns out it was Sunday or Monday morning, because I would have had to like notarize paperwork or something, so it had to be Monday or whatever happened. I don't remember. I was talking back and forth with him. I'm like, what do you really need to get for it? And he was adamant on his price, and I was like, fine. I didn't even care. I had to have this bus. With that back deck, I was just like, oh my God, because I wanted it to be open. And this is like the whole back half of the bus is open, and obviously airy because you're outside. And that's the thing about vans. I got nothing against vans. People love them. But for me, a little claustrophobic. Like just too cave-ish, too closed in. So I saw this bus. I get a one-way ticket to Kentucky. And I tell them I'm coming. And I get the one-way fucking ticket. And I end up going, I have to fly to like Atlanta or something. maybe even Florida. I don't even know. I had to go like some crazy place way past Kentucky and then have like a 3.5 hour layover. Part of the reason it was so much is because I saved like $250 by buying that ticket, which sounds like not a lot now, but this is 5 years ago before everything doubled in price. So I did that, and so I leave Sunday at I don't know what time. Spend like 9 hours traveling to Kentucky, some little town, southern Kentucky. I get there at like 4 in the morning. I take a nap in the airport on some whatever, waiting till it's dawn because I got to meet this guy in the morning. And now it's like 5:30 in the morning, some little rinky-dink airport, and I go and I'm going to rent a car and drive to this guy's place, which is like a good half hour, 40 minutes away or something. And I can't rent a car. They won't rent me a car because I don't have a credit card. And I probably had one or owned one, but I didn't have it with me, and they wouldn't let me do it with my debit card. They're like, we can't rent you a car with a debit card. And I'm like, why not? And I'm like showing them my bank account. And I'm like, look at the money I have in my bank account. Like, it's more than enough for whatever I might get upcharged to. Because, like I said, I've been working every single day for like 7 years prior to this happening, or almost. I was starting to slide a little bit. I had been on a vacation. That's part of the prologue story. So I can't rent a car, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. How am I going to get that? I'm going to have to call this guy and ask him to come get me. It's like 40 minutes or an hour away or so. I don't know what. And I end up getting an Uber to drive me like 45 miles, and it actually cost less than the rental car would have. Case in point. So if you're ever thinking you need to rent a car, guess what? Uber was cheaper than the car rental would have been. Anyway, and then I couldn't get it. So now I get an Uber, and I go, and now I'm messaging with the guy. He's like, meet me I'm supposed to meet him somewhere. I forget. I end up at this diner, which isn't even open because of COVID. It's only open for takeout. But they let me sit in the dining room with my takeout food while I wait for this guy to come get me. Meanwhile, before, when I was getting ready to leave and go on the plane and messaging him, he's giving me grief about a cashier's check. I'm bringing a cashier's check to pay him, and he's like kind of giving me a hard time about it. I'm like, dude, it's a bank check. I mean, do you really think I'm flying from Boston to Kentucky to like scam you over this bus, and I have to drive it back to Boston, right? Like how crazy would that be? So I have a $5,000 cashier's check, which I already had because I had it for a property auction, which then I didn't end up using, and $500 cash. He won't wiggle it all in the price. So now I've been up for like 24 hours. And I get there, and probably the night before too, barely slept because I was so excited about it. Like before I fly somewhere, I never sleep. And he doesn't have the paperwork done. And you have to get something for him to sign over the title from the registry. I don't know what the rules are in Kentucky, and he doesn't have it. And then the woman's not at town hall, or she's not going to be in there till 11 or something. So this goes on like all day. So I'm hanging around this guy's auto/welding shop all day and talking and all these conversations about people and society and integrity for whatever reason, and he's some kind of Christian and talking to me these things. Finally I get out of there late in the day. Now I've been up for like a day and a half, and now I'm going to drive to Boston. I should like cut this off and let there be a part two. Let me see how many minutes I've been yapping here. Hold on. Let me do my little spy eye thing. 19 minutes. All right, 20 minutes. I am cutting this off at 20 minutes. So for the crazy drive from Kentucky to Boston, you'll have to look for part two. This has been Rain on the Road. A story of how to break out of the box of life.